It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Craig, I'd like to start with you this morning. We did hear from President Biden that he has given clemency to his son. I think everybody is reminded of the fact that he said he would not pardon his son, and yet here we are. I do want to have a larger discussion about the political consequences of presidential pardons, but what's your take on the Biden decision?
Well, let's start with just a bit of history, but it'll be brief. I mean, the right or the authority to grant a pardon is something that was put into the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2 of our Constitution. It wasn't considered lightly. It was actually debated with Alexander Hamilton favoring a president alone having that right to pardon. And believe it or not, based on my research, this goes back to 700 A.D. when kings were given this ability, and the purpose of the pardon is to show mercy. So it's not like this is something new. There are typically hundreds of pardons granted in the course of a term, but it's those that are exceptional that get the attention. So Gerald Ford pardons Richard Nixon. President Jimmy Carter pardoned draft dodgers. Actually, Donald Trump pardoned his political team, Paul Manafort and others. So that always gets attention. With respect to Biden, I may be in a completely different camp. I honestly, I wish that he had not promised that he would not do this. I thought that was kind of foolish at the time. It was predicated, I think, on his belief that he could beat Donald Trump, and he'd be the nominee, and two, he would beat Donald Trump. But life changed, and so I sort of find myself, as I talk to friends, saying, look, first of all, why are you surprised that he pardoned his son, for heaven's sakes? Look at what Hunter Biden has gone through. It's been torturous. It was a serious drug addiction issue that led to a firearms, misrepresentation on a firearms form and probably tax evasion. So, okay. But the prospect of continuing to go after Hunter Biden, I'm sure, weighed heavily on a father's mind, and he did what he has the authority to do, and he has the authority without any consultation with the Congress, something the Congress, of course, doesn't like. So wait, why are you surprised? Secondly, Republicans don't really have any argument they can make. I mean, we Republicans nominated somebody who's a convicted felon and pushed him over the line, barely, I might add, with a victory. So I don't know how Republicans can be all that upset. Democrats, for heaven's sakes, you told the incumbent president he was too old and not capable of running and winning, and he immediately endorsed his vice president. And when she lost, a lot of the blame goes to the Biden administration not being able to get their messages out and Biden waiting too long to run. So I think he says to his friendly Democrats, well, sorry you don't like it, but it's my right to do it. So I don't think it's going to have nearly the consequences on his overall time in office that some people are speculating about. I think it's a story that got everybody up in arms. It's never good to go back on a pledge. There's no question about that. But as I said, I wish he hadn't made the pledge, but he did, and there's a price to pay. I don't know that it's going to be a great one. We'll see.
Al, Craig makes a good case for the pardoning of his son, but at the end of the day, doesn't these kind of reversals make people more cynical about the Democratic Party?
They have two parties to be cynical about. I don't think it necessarily will make them more cynical about the Democratic Party. They were cynical enough about the Democratic Party to elect Donald Trump. So, but look, I associate myself mostly of what Craig said. He understands the pardon system a lot better than I do. The controversial pardons are never really good politics. That's why the presidents do them as they're leaving office. They don't do them in their first year and have to answer for all their time. Most presidents will do pardon friends or political associates, as Craig said. Trump did his share of pardoning his political associates who were involved in probably more serious crimes against the republic, though not necessarily more serious crimes than Hunter Biden. Look, I mean, I think Biden's legacy has always been very complicated. And I don't think, this isn't going to help him. But when a president loses his fight for reelection, that probably is the overwhelming thing that, defines his legacy. I might make one exception for George H.W. Bush because he also presided over the end of the Cold War, which was for which he has gotten a lot of credit and deserves it. But Biden's presidency was the presidency that the American people, for better or for worse, thought was not a very good job. It gave him a 40% approval rating. This goes on top of a year where most of us thought he should have gotten out, and he and his staff maintained he was perfectly capable of being president for 4 more years, which was made obviously not true in the debate. So, I mean, I think the Biden thing is really complicated. To me, the thing that bothers, I mean, look, I understand why a father wants to pardon his son and save him from further abuse with an administration that is coming in promising retribution. But the thing, the last point I'll make is the thing that does bother me about this is not only that he said he wouldn't, because, but then Biden's history, if you go back all the way to college and then 1988 campaign, and along the way, it's not always been being completely forthright about the truth. But the argument he used, in essence, is the argument that Trump uses, which is a selective prosecution, argument that the Justice Department basically makes political decisions on who they're going to go after. And I think that is damaging because it basically reinforces the argument that Trump's making about himself. And I guess if he was going to do it, he could have just done it without making this long explanation. He doesn't have to make the explanation, and he would have done. I don't know that it affected his legacy, but he sure would have done the country a favor if he hadn't sort of reinforced what is a bogus argument that Trump has made. And just one other thing, the prosecution of Hunter Biden came under the Biden administration.
Craig, I'd like to switch gears and talk about transition. And the Trump team is pushing out a lot of nominees. And surprisingly, there's a lot of pushback from Republican senators, which indicates to me that this is not going to be that kind of mandate that people expected from Trump's unique victory.
So I think a couple of things are happening. First of all, it was a very flawed strategy from the start to be so impetuous to want to throw names out there quickly and get news headlines. For heaven's sakes, Trump won the election. He was going to command attention no matter what he did. He didn't need to be putting these names out there. And in doing so, he did them a disservice, and he did his own transition operation a disservice, because he really ceded in a way to the press the role of doing the background checking. And so it made no sense, and it's creating the challenge of having to clean up this mess probably well into next year. I don't know how it's going to go. It's also, one of the rules we had back in the H.W. Bush transition in 1988 into 89 was that we would always have at least 3 candidates for every position. Even if George Bush had the person he wanted in the job in his mind, we wanted to show him at least one and hopefully 2 others. So there were 3. And the reason that was important was because we did the background checking on all 3. And if the one that the president-elect most favored ended up with impossible financial, legal, but impossible financial dealings to untangle, and he couldn't serve or she couldn't serve, or there was a background issue, the person could just step away. And we never announced who the 3 were. And it was much more fair to the prospective nominee when they understood what they might be up against to step away quietly than to have put their name out in the press, let the press tear into their record, and create the kind of news stories that are created. And you know what? It's very curious. Anybody who actually believes that they might be a member of the president's cabinet tends to also believe that those skeletons in their closet will stay in the closet, and they won't. They will be discovered. So it's far better to do that work in advance before putting the names out. So I think the process, and for senators who have served for many years and gone through this, they're have to say to themselves, Republicans and certainly Democrats, why would we allow this to go forward when so little work was done looking into the background of these people? I heard one Republican senator say, well, there are some serious questions that have to be answered, and they're issues that even President-elect Trump didn't know about when he named the person. So you get the sense that there's frustration just with, I would say, the quality of the process. The other thing that I think hitting people is just how close this election was, just how close the margin in the House of Representatives now is. And that, as you've heard us say before so many times, nothing like a little fear about getting reelected to motivate somebody to stand up. 1/3 of the United States Senate has to be reelected in 2 years. They have to be asking themselves whether they are going to just lay down and get run over by the Trump transition, or whether they're going to stand up and fulfill their constitutional responsibility. And actually, I'm encouraged they're sending the signal they're going to perform their constitutional responsibility, and that is what's causing a rethinking of some of these nominees.
Well, you have the last word this week.
This is not an ordinary transition. I mean, this is a transition where Lord knows what they're preparing on policy, if anything. But on personnel, the president decides who he thinks is loyal, who he thinks will seek retribution against his political adversaries, and has put the most controversial people in the most important spots, which is one of the interesting things about this. I don't want to take complete issue with your question, but I'm not sure how much real pushback there is right now. There is an enormous amount of unease. But so far, you have a guy who has been nominated for Secretary of Defense who, it's pretty clear has a serious drinking problem, has a problem of abusing women, has serious management questions about running small organizations, let alone the most complicated organization in the world. And as far as I know, not one Republican senator has actually said, I am going to vote against him. What you have are a lot of people who are scared out of their minds that they may have to vote for him, and and hope he goes away. And maybe, and I'm sure, the pushback will be, to some degree, it will be private, but it's going to take somebody, and maybe it's Joni Ernst, who seems to be the focal point of a lot of this, the senator from Iowa, who probably would be a pretty good candidate for defense secretary herself, who will stand up and say no. I mean, she's a military veteran, and she also has been the leader in trying to reduce abuse against women in the military. But the Matt Gaetz withdrew his nomination for attorney general, but that's pretty low bar. I mean, having somebody who's being investigated for basically sex trafficking and drugs is not exactly a high bar for the attorney general. So I think we're going to have to see where it goes. I mean, we have, and I hope that that at some point, rather than just sort of suggesting they may be against them, some of these Republican senators will actually come out and say, "You're not going to get my vote." And you also, but PTEX isn't the only one. I mean, you have somebody who a lot of people think is, if not a Russian asset, certainly a Russian sympathizer, is nominated for Director of National Intelligence. You have somebody who takes positions that are extraordinarily detrimental to the public health as Secretary of HHS. Those certainly ought to come under the same kind of scrutiny or more. And now we have one of his political henchmen nominated, or at least named to be the next director of the FBI. And from what I've seen, an awful lot of those Republicans are willing to go along with that one. So we'll see how much real pushback there is. I think one thing that's interesting is that Trump doesn't accumulate political capital the way ordinary people do. I mean, he doesn't go out there and do favors for people and win their support, and so they owe him something. He intimidates them, and that so and he doesn't really care. I think. I mean, I just find it hard to sort of explain, but in the sense that, but I don't think he cares if people don't like him as long as they go along with him. I mean, he wants everybody to like him, but he's willing to intimidate. And so I don't think we'll see if some of these senators who are up next time start to really make it clear they're going to vote against him. Is Trump going to try to primary him in the next election? Those are the kind of things that I think we'll just have to play out. I hope. And in my day, when I worked in the Senate, there were senators on both sides who would just ignore all the nonsense and say, we have to protect the country, the national security, the public health, and the prerogatives of the Senate. I hope that happens with them, but I'm just not clear on that yet.
Because Al mentioned policy. I think that, Trump supporters ought to be concerned about this. It is really important to get the top 100 people identified, nominated, and well along in the process by the time you get to the inauguration, so that you can run the government with the people that you want to put in there. Mm-hmm. So this approach they're taking has consequences, and the consequence is the policy initiatives are going to get pushed way down the road. Again, it's apparent, being reported on. I hope it's accurate that the FBI is going to start doing background checks. I think that has a very positive effect in who gets named. And it will give the Senate the ability and the comfort, more comfort in accepting some of the nominees. But there are consequences to this, and it's really Trump supporters that ought to have a great fear about it.
The other thing about that point is that with right now, it looks like until April he's only going to have a 1-vote majority in the House. That's going to make it hard enough to do any policy. So having a fight over these nominees that goes into the February or March could be detrimental. I don't think we'll have a lot of 100-day achievements.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thanks so much indeed. We will see you next week.